So I've been covering The Chosen for the last 3.5, almost 4 years. And there's a lot of stuff that has happened, of course, through our deep dives, through the episodes coming out, through new seasons, through moments of controversy. And this has been something that has been going on since season 1 of The Chosen, really. But I think the top moments of controversy are always interesting to talk about. Why did they happen? What are they? And you know, were they really that bad? Some, maybe, I don't know. Let's go through them today and talk about the absolute most controversial moments from The Chosen itself. Now, the one that we're going to start with is kind of like a bonus one outside of the top 5 that I'm really going to talk about mostly. Now, this one in particular is not really something that's in the show, which is why I don't really want to talk about it too much. I don't really care what happens on set or with some of the actors or anything else. Of course, there's been controversies over Jonathan Rumi being Catholic and different things that he does with that. Of course, there's been controversies over how the actresses dress and if it's modest or not, right? There's been a bunch of stuff like that. This first one is similar to those. The rest of them will all be directly from the show and not from outside of the show. So this first one here, of course, is this moment right here from the behind the scenes.
Fine.
All right, let's continue, and action.
So who would have thought Judas and Z doing laundry together would be one of the most fascinating scenes?
And there it was. Did you see it? If we back up a little bit on the YouTube video, you can see the left side of the screen, there's a pride flag, okay? And if you back up even more, you can see on the cameraman himself, he's wearing pride patches there, okay? Now, we talked about this at length. I'm not going to go over it again here, but this is the private equipment of some of the camera people, okay? So one camera person in particular, okay? The one that's in frame right now. Obviously, this is his private equipment. He can do whatever he wants with his private equipment. Any stickers or flags or anything else that he wants to put on there, he can. However, when this happened, and this was in the behind the scenes, this erupted like wildfire online. And everybody started talking about how The Chosen promotes pride, they promote LGBTQ. There's a bunch of stuff that people just started spouting off that just wasn't actually true. And so this is not Dallas's personal pride flag. This is not his patches that are on the cameraman, right? He didn't hand these out to everybody on the set and be like, hey guys, it's Pride Month, let's celebrate it. That's not what happened at all. In fact, Dallas has talked about, you know, many times his beliefs as a Christian. Clearly, he does not agree with the Pride movement or the LGBTQ movement. And he's made that pretty clear. However, there are many people who definitely took this way too far. So this is our little bonus section here. This was a big one that happened over the last year. And so I just wanted to mention it here because I know if I don't mention it, I'm going to get a bajillion comments saying, you missed this one, you missed this one. So that's where we're going to start with that one. Moving on from here, let's talk about the next serious one, which is in season 2, episode 5. And here it is right here.
Salt preserves from corruption. If it loses its saltiness, it doesn't do what it is. No. If salt has lost its flavor, its salty taste, it's... Rabbi.
So that was it right there. So during this scene, this is season 2, episode 5, before the Sermon on the Mount. And we see that Jesus, throughout this entire season, has been preparing his Sermon on the Mount. That is obviously one of the biggest sermons in Scripture, one of the most important that Jesus gives throughout Scripture. It goes over several different chapters in the book of Matthew, right? But here we see him kind of working out what he wants to say for the sermon. He's talking about the salt, talking about how he wants to say it, kind of reworking the words a little bit. When this first happened, even people that were close to me really freaked out about this because they were really under the impression that Jesus would just have all of these words and not have to work on anything, right? He wouldn't have to try to practice or try to write out a speech that he was giving. Everything would just be given to him by the Father and it would come out of his mouth, right? This is very possible. I don't think this is something that I can be like, no, you're totally wrong. This would never happen. You know, Jesus would have to go through all this stuff. However, I think there's a lot of evidence in the scriptures that Jesus learned, that Jesus worked things out, that Jesus asked human questions. And so I think this is very fair to say that Jesus could put together his sermon in this way. I don't think it's entirely fair to say that Jesus never planned anything in his life. I don't think it's entirely fair to say that Jesus never worked out what he wanted to say, right? I believe that a lot of the parables that he said were spoken many, 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 many times, right? And so I'm sure that he worked on how he wanted to tell these parables and the purposes behind them. And I'm sure there are other times that God just gave him clear direction and clear words for exactly what he needed to say, right? I just don't think there's a clear answer in scripture for if this is the case or not. This is the mystery of who Jesus is, right? This is the mystery of him being fully God and yet fully man. How much did he know? How much did he not know? What kind of questions did he ask? These are some of the biggest questions that we have in the scriptures, right? Of how Jesus operated. Because there are some moments when Jesus literally reads people's minds, and then there are other moments where he's asking specific questions about certain things, right? And there's at least one thing that he doesn't know, which is when he will return. So if he doesn't know that, that means that he is not all-knowing. So if he doesn't know that one thing, then there could be other things that he chooses not to know because he's put his godhood aside. So all of that being said, this was definitely a controversial moment. I know there was a ton of people that were really upset by this because they truly believed that Dallas may be writing in Jesus as just human and not divine. But clearly we see that that's not the case in any way, because throughout the rest of the show, we definitely see that Jesus is divine as well. There's a lot of moments when he declares that he is God very, very, very clearly. And so we see that all throughout the rest of the season. So that is our number one. I think it's pretty mild. I think most people now totally understand, oh, he was human. There's definitely times when he probably would have been doing something like this. It's definitely plausible at the very least. So that is number one, our kind of most mild kind of section there. Next, we're going to the next episode directly after this, which is where we see Mary Magdalene's relapse. And that's this here.
Mary.
I thought I was dreaming you.
Can you walk?
I'm not going anywhere.
We have to go back.
No, I can't.
Come on, Mary. He told us to comfort you.
No, no. He already fixed me once. And I broke again.
Such a beautiful line there. He already fixed me once and I broke again. So to give some context and a reminder of what happened here, episode 5 of season 2, we see that Mary encounters a demoniac again, and she is kind of struggling with a lot of things throughout the episode. In the beginning of the episode, she interacts with 2 Roman soldiers who are on the road, and she's afraid that she's going to get taken advantage of again, that we see happen to her in the past from episode 1. Then later on, we see that she just has all of these things that trigger her in episode 5, which brings her to episode 6 to relapse and begin getting drunk again and playing games of chance again in the bar, all the way to this point here where Simon and Matthew go into town to try to find her. This is in Jericho, by the way. I believe it's in Jericho. And so we see as Mary here is really, really struggling in this episode. However, this leads to Jesus welcoming her back, and we have this moment here, of course.
Someday. But not here.
I'm just so sorry.
Look up.
I can't.
You can. Look at me. I forgive you. It's over.
So we see that happen here. Of course, one of the most impactful moments of this episode for sure. However, a lot of people were upset by this. Why? Well, a lot of people were upset by this because they believed that, well, Mary had already been healed. Why would she be going back to those other things, right? why would she be going back to the alcohol or back to the gambling or back to this other environment? Why would she run away from Jesus? Why wouldn't she just go to him? Shouldn't she be fixed now, right? Shouldn't she be in a better place now? And the truth is that this is not how it works, right? This was controversial during the time, and I think a lot of people were upset, which was very interesting because a lot of people were upset at episode 5, and then immediately after at episode 6, they were mad again. And so this was a pretty big moment for The Chosen to be like, a lot of people are getting mad at this show. Like, what is going on, you know? A lot of critical stuff kind of going on. And here, of course, this is not how it works. I know a lot of Christians that still struggle with different things like addiction or alcoholism or really anything else in their life, right? Anger or a ton of stuff, right? Think of any sin, right? Obviously, we are not perfect, even though we follow Jesus. A lot of people were kind of weirded out that someone that followed Jesus so closely would still struggle with some of these things as well. But obviously, you're not thinking of people like Peter or Judas. These guys sinned all the time. And of course, Judas eventually led to the betrayal of Jesus. Now, we see even Peter, even after the resurrection, even after everything happened there, he still has troubles. He still is sinning. Paul calls him out on certain things that happen, right? There's a lot of different things that happen. Read the book of Galatians, for example. It shows you an area where Paul is calling out Peter for doing something silly, right? For doing something that he knows that he shouldn't. And so even Peter then, way later, right? This is like 20 years later after Jesus, and he's still making these mistakes. He's not perfect. So none of us are perfect ever. We're not perfect, right? At least this side of heaven, we cannot be perfect. We cannot be sinless. And so having Mary go back through this, I think is a really interesting way of showing how sin creeps up on us and brings us to these other places. We see these things that specifically trigger her, such as the Roman and such as the demoniac, and we see her begin to fall back into the rhythms that she had before. If you didn't notice, and I'm sure we'll go over this in our deep dive of this episode in particular, in episode 5 and 6, in episode 5, after she sees the Roman soldier, there's a scene where she is teaching Rama how to read and write, okay? In that scene in particular, you see her doing the same exact thing that she was doing in episode 1 of The Chosen, which is leaning on a drink. Now, in that scene specifically, I think it's water. However, she does the same exact movement. She's holding the cup the same. She's drinking it the same. It's kind of a coping mechanism. It's a muscle memory for her to walk back into that after dealing with the Romans earlier that day. And then the demoniac is the thing that sends her over the edge to run away from everybody else and to run into Jericho in order to kind of drown her sorrows and go back to Lilith, so to speak. Now, while Lilith is dead, Mary decides to go back into that world because she's afraid that she's not good enough. She's afraid that she's going to get hurt. She's trying to find comfort somewhere else, where she feels like, you know, other people may not care about her as much, or different things like that within the show. So I don't think this one's particularly controversial either, although it was a very, very big deal when this episode first launched. A lot of people had issues with it, for sure. So anyway, let's move on to the next controversy and the next season overall. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this video and you want to see us making more content just like this, then you can help to support us over at snipesupport.com. This is a great place where you can pledge $5, $10, or $25 a month in order to help us to continue to make this level of videos and keep on doing what we do. Oftentimes YouTube is fickle and sometimes it can be scary. Just last week, we saw that the Brosen was completely banned from YouTube and then slowly reinstated over the next day or so. This was terrifying for us because if we get banned or our channel videos get taken down, that means that all the revenue from those videos and everything else is completely shut off for that period of time. And that could be a day or a week or a month, or in some cases I've seen on YouTube, years. And that's terrifying. So we want to be able to diversify and have you guys support our content in other places. Patreon is the best for this. So we'd love for you to go over there at snipesupport.com and sign up if you can. If not, no worries. But over on Patreon, you'll find extra content as well as our full live streams, which are often 3 hours weekly that we post only on Patreon. So anyway, let's get back to the video, but I wanted to thank you for your support and for even watching this video in the first place. Anyway, let's get back to it. Of course, we have season 3 here, episode 3, which is the I am the law of Moses line.
Then I cannot save you.
Who do you think you are?
This is what Hannah talked about. That he even called himself the Messiah.
Are you claiming to be the Messiah? Or are you merely claiming to speak for the Lord as a prophet?
Yes.
You are a false prophet.
Whoa, that is quite a thing to say.
Jesus, maybe we should leave.
Lazarus, you're his friend. You cannot be involved.
You know what the law of Moses
We are all his friends, Aaron. We cannot say things like this.
Jesus, stand up at once.
Rabbi, please. Rafi, come with Jesus and me. No. We will leave, and you can all continue the service.
Rabbi Benjamin has asserted false prophecy, and I cannot argue.
You said you saw the miracle.
He's saying only he can save us.
He did not use those words.
It's what I meant.
Jesus, you're not helping.
I love that line. Just it's what I meant.
He's saying we are not the holy ones chosen.
Now, he did not say that.
In words, a book of Moses. But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name that I have not commanded him to speak, that same prophet shall die.
Rabbi Benjamin, I beg of you, not this.
Lazarus, it's fine.
Jesus, they are going to...
Yes.
Jesus, if you do not renounce your words, we will have no choice but to follow the law of Moses.
I am the law of Moses.
So obviously this is coming from season 3, episode 3. Jesus is taken out of the synagogue and they threaten to stone him here. The reason why this was such a controversial moment comes down to one of the biggest criticisms over the Chosen overall. And that is that some people that are part of the company of the Chosen are Mormons. And so Mormons are, it's a dangerous thing within Christian theology, because Mormon theology is close to Christian theology, but it has a lot of things that are twisted in a way that makes it, in my opinion, not Christianity. And so there are just things that are too far apart. For example, Jesus being a man who becomes God, and that God once was a man on a different planet in somewhere else in the universe, okay? And so... or in a different universe even. Can't remember exactly. But the idea that men can become gods and that those who follow the teachings of Jesus will then become gods and have their own universes one day, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of different things. Of course, that's just the very simplified version. But there are some people on the Chosen, including some of the people that are very high up in the Chosen company that are Mormons, right? And so because of this, a lot of people struggled with this line in particular, because if you just Google search I am the law of Moses, it looks like it comes from I think the book of 2nd Nephi or something like that. And so from the Mormon scriptures. However, I've talked to Dallas personally about this issue right when it was happening. Everybody was freaking out thinking that Dallas wrote in a line from the Book of Mormon, that he wrote in something that was in that realm. But in actuality, Dallas has never read the Book of Mormon. He's never seen this line before. He did not know that it existed. It does not make the line that Jesus is saying here not true, right? While it is uncomfortable that this is not in scripture, but it is in the Book of Mormon, it doesn't make that line that he says, I am the law of Moses, untrue to the truth of scripture. And so him saying, I am the law of Moses is not using a Mormon line, but rather saying, I am the fulfillment of the law. I am the fulfillment of all of what Moses was. I am the fulfillment of what you're talking about in this moment, when he's talking about using the law of Moses to stone Jesus and to kill him. And so clearly Jesus is not talking about something from the Book of Mormon. He's not trying to use that. Dallas did not know that that line existed in the Book of Mormon. But this definitely was something that was really controversial during the time when the trailer first launched for season 3. I was hyped up by that line. If you saw my reaction to the series, to the trailer, I was hyped up by that. But afterwards, there was a lot of controversy, and I had a lot of conversations with Brandon Robbins and with Dallas himself and with a bunch of people behind the scenes, different pastors and different people that I'm close with. And so, I wanted to make sure that I was right about this and that I understood what was kind of going on. But man, a lot of people were so upset by this. So much so that a lot of people stopped watching the show at this point as well. Now, I'm sure there was way more people that came and began to watch the show in season 3 than stopped watching the show. I'm absolutely certain of that. But this definitely was one of the more controversial moments, and I could see it a little bit more while I still disagree. I could see how it could be controversial a little bit more just because they didn't know that this existed in the Mormon scriptures, right? So it's kind of hard to say there. But anyway, moving on from number 3 to number 4, which also happens in season 3. We're actually going to go back in time here to episode 2. And of course, this is this scene with little James, some of your favorite scenes in all of The Chosen. However, the kind of understanding of this scene overall got a lot of people very, very upset.
Master.
Little James.
May I have a moment?
Of course.
I am... Forgive me, I'm not always confident to speak.
Slow to speak. It's a very good quality.
Wanted to ask you a question.
Please?
So you're sending us out with the ability to heal the sick and lame. Yes, that is what you said.
Yes.
So you're telling me that I have the ability to heal. Forgive me, I just find that difficult to imagine with my condition, which you haven't healed.
Do you want to be healed?
Yes, of course, if that's possible.
I think you've seen enough to know it's possible.
So, you know the rest of the scene at this point. We see as little James comes to Jesus, asks him to be healed, and he says no. Now, this is a pretty hard thing. I mean, there's a lot of people in the world that believe that Jesus healed everybody who asked. We'll talk about that in a second, but in this situation here, obviously, we see that Jesus tells him no, and that he denies his request to be healed, and he gives his own reasons, saying that your testimony will be stronger, that other people will be impacted way more because of your malady, right? And so there's a reason behind it here from Jesus' point of view. But a lot of people said, no way, this is just so wrong. There's no way that that Jesus would deny someone healing, especially if it was one of his apostles coming to ask him for healing. This also is another wrench in this, is that little James did not have this malady as far as we know in scripture itself, right? The only thing that we see him having as like a cane or something is a club that he carries in some iconography. But this is like a traditional thing. We don't really know that he was associated with this club from scripture. And so anyway, so none of this really ties into the actual scripture. So a lot of people are upset, saying like, hey, you're adding in these things for no reason. Jesus would heal everybody that asks. Jesus continues to heal those that have faith, et cetera, et cetera. And so here's the conflict here with a lot of that. Scripturally, we see that there are a lot of people that Jesus does not heal who want him to. There are certain towns that he can't do any miracles. He can't heal them because of how they're approaching him and how they are using him for certain things, right? There are instances of that for sure. However, we don't see that within the apostles. We don't see that within, certain people that are close to him, etc. We don't have a lot of biblical evidence of that. But we do see, for example, that like his dad is dead, for example. We don't really see that, right? We don't see him resurrecting his dad or healing his dad. So there are certain things that happen throughout scripture that show us, no, Jesus doesn't heal everybody that asks. He doesn't heal everybody that's around him. There obviously were still funerals in the first century in Israel, right? Just because Jesus was there doesn't mean that those things went away. And so there is pain. There is hurt. Sin still has an impact in the world, right? Through maladies and through these different things, but God doesn't always just get rid of those things. He sometimes uses them to the advantage of the kingdom. And he makes a beautiful mosaic out of broken pottery. And so that's what he's doing here with little James, in my opinion. Again, I think this is the same level as the last one, where it's kind of like, I can see where people are getting upset at the writers because there's no scriptural basis for this. If there was a scriptural basis, I think nobody would care at all. But because there's not a scriptural basis for little James specifically to have this malady or to be healed, or not to be healed, then I think people have a little bit harder time kind of getting into this. However, for me, I don't think it's a really big deal. I've prayed for a lot of people to be healed that are not healed. I've prayed to be healed of certain sicknesses myself throughout my life, right? That I was not healed of immediately like I thought I was, right? Eventually, little James will be healed and his sickness will be gone and he will be in heaven and he will be happier than he's ever been, right? And fuller than he's ever been. And it'll be completely different than where he is now. However, God has decided for whatever reason not to heal him. Jesus has decided in this moment for whatever reason not to heal him. It wasn't God's will. And so if Jesus tried to do that, he would be going outside of God's will, right? Which of course he would never do. And so that's kind of the whole situation here. I don't find this one super controversial. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. What level of controversial would you rate this at? But I know a lot of people were very moved by this scene, and a lot of people were very upset at this scene, which directly correlates to our next scene, which I think is the most controversial scene in all of The Chosen so far. And I know that because I asked Reddit. I asked Reddit, what do you guys think is the most controversial scenes of The Chosen? And the most upvoted comment by far on Reddit was Rama's death, by far. And a lot of people echoed this exact thought, that by far the most controversial thing to ever happen in Chosen history is Rama's death. So let's go to that. Let's check out this scene here and let's break it down a little bit as to why it's a controversial one.
Where is he? Answer me! Rama! Where's Jesus? Where is he? Rama!
Come on, let's find the others.
Stay there! Where is he? Stop! Ah!
There it is. The death of Rama, of course, is the most recent in the line of controversies that we've had of The Chosen. This one in particular is probably the one that I agree with the most, although I don't agree with the reasoning that a lot of people have for it. Let me go into that in a little bit. I'll kind of explain the controversy, why people are mad, and then I'll explain why I don't think it necessarily works in the show. So first of all, people are mad at this because of this moment later on where Rama is dying. She's dead. Jesus comes and we have this moment.
Here now, Rabbi. Please. This is a mistake.
Thomas, I'm so sorry.
Rabbi, you don't have to let this happen. Just take it back. Just take it back. She might not be dead yet. You can heal, right?
So doesn't happen. He doesn't heal her, right? Another moment where it's echoing that little James moment, but it's even more so, right? Again, this is not based in a scriptural thing that happened, right? So it's harder for fans to justify and to like this or to see why it had to happen. So the controversy here is, one, that Jesus would allow this to happen. Two, that Jesus would not heal her or resurrect her after it happened. And that he wouldn't basically comfort Thomas in this moment. Now, there has been, of course, reactions and responses to those questions that Dallas has gone over the last 8 months or so, ever since this came out. The first thing, let's talk about why Jesus didn't comfort Thomas. Basically, I think this is a fine response, which is that Thomas is not the type of person that would need that type of comforting. Jesus would know that Thomas in that moment does not need a hug from Jesus, who just said that he's not going to heal Rama. In the next episode, we do see that Thomas runs up to Jesus and embraces him, and that kind of connection is there. I think that's fine. Why did Jesus allow this to happen? Let's go there. Well, obviously things happen all around Jesus all the time. He might have known that this was going to happen. It seems like in the show, he realized as he was walking away that this has just happened. Like he got that knowledge from God after the fact. Like he didn't know it was going to happen in the first place. Although it seems like he definitely did know it was going to happen, because even in season 3, episode 3, he kind of talks about Thomas and Rama, and he says, I would love that they would be betrothed, etc., etc. And he kind of has this moment where he talks about it there. And it's kind of somber. I think he knows this is coming. It's definitely something that is kind of foreshadowed throughout season 4, especially, but even back in season 3. This is something that Dallas planned from the very beginning. I see this comment a lot as well, like, oh, Dallas just decided to throw this in here because he wants to have this dramatic Hollywood moment. That's not true either. Dallas planned this from season 1, he said. And so it's been something that's been ready to go since then. And so this is the right time to do it, he said. But the main controversy, at least scripturally, comes from, hey, Jesus would never allow this to happen. And if it did happen, he would have raised her from the dead. Obviously, we saw him raise the widow's son. We saw him raise Jairus' daughter. We also see him raise Lazarus a little bit later on. And so why wouldn't Jesus raise this one? Like I said earlier, I think that this whole thing is misconstrued a little bit, because obviously funerals happened during the time of Jesus. His own dad died and he didn't resurrect him, right? There's a lot of people around that area that, of course, would have died. And there would have been funerals all the time. There would have been tombs used all the time. And so if that wasn't the case, we would have like this random archaeological point in history where nobody died. Like Jesus just healed all the Jews that were killed during that time. I don't think so. I think that's probably a bad argument overall. However, kind of looking at the situation, it's hard to accept it because it's not a scriptural thing, right? Rama is not a scriptural character. Thomas does not have this response and these different things in this section. So that's kind of the main controversy, is again echoing little James here. We're seeing the same thing where people are thinking that there needs to be a healing here when there doesn't necessarily need to be. I think my personal problems with this section are as follows. I think logically, the writing here falls pretty heavily, in my opinion. The fact that Thomas does this is the weirdest thing.
Stop!
Like this moment right here, I get that, like Dallas has talked about this before. He said that like Thomas was so blind, nearsighted that he's like running towards Jesus. He's just trying to get Rama out of here. But Thomas is not like dumb. Like, this is what I love about the show. I love that the show does not treat the characters or us like we're unintelligent, right? Thomas is just not he's one of the smartest people in the whole entire group, right? it would be different if it was like Big James and he was like bull rushing through a crowd and he happens to run into a Roman soldier. But this part right here is, it is just so hard for me to see Thomas doing this. For
Where
sure.
is he?
Like, he just walks straight into the sword,
Stop!
hits Quintis, which he didn't have to do. Like, there was room on the other side of him. And then Quintis attacks, right? So it's just like a really weird thing for me logically. And I think the writing of this portion here of how they interacted and how they did these different things, like there were so many other ways that Thomas could have gotten out of that situation. By this point, he knows Capernaum very well. It's not like that was the only escape that he had to get out of this area. It's not like Quintis was even targeting him. Quintis was looking for Jesus specifically. And while he is an apostle of Jesus and Quintis may have been like looking at him to find Jesus, I don't know. It's just a weird thing. I get the killing portion of it where Quintis would have blindly attacked whoever was near him. I get that portion of it. I don't get Thomas just walking in here like that. I just don't get it. The other portions, which I've talked about at length throughout season 4, one of my biggest criticisms of season 4 overall was Thomas's reaction to all of this, and how it played out here. I think there are a lot of other ways that this could have gone other than Rama dying. And I think it still would have, like, you could have removed Rama from the situation without killing her, but still allowing Thomas to gain that doubtfulness without him being turned into who we see now as emo Thomas, right? So this is the one scene that I agree with about the controversy of being like, I don't agree why people think it's a controversial scene, but I do agree there probably could have been something else here in its place that would have worked better for this scene in particular. And the consequences of this scene throughout all of season 4, 5, and 6, and 7 that are coming up. I get that we need Thomas to be a doubting Thomas for season 7. However, I'm not sure this is the best way to do it here. I think I definitely would have written something different in my version of events, right? But I do think that they handled it well overall. I think there are some great moments with Thomas throughout this. And of course, this is something that was planned from the very beginning, and so they wanted to stick with that as well. I don't know. I definitely have some doubts here for this scene in particular, but not because of the controversial thing of like, oh, he should have raised her or different things like that. I think biblically, we don't really see that that's the case, right? So yeah. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that. I'd love to hear your thoughts about these controversial moments from The Chosen. These are the top 5 most controversial moments from The Chosen. I think most of them can be explained pretty biblically. I think there's some arguments for some of the other ones. And of course, this is going to come down to your opinion as well of how you think some of these things went, how you think, some of these moments played out. I think most of them were written very, very well. I think there are some problems with the last one, but that's just me personally. Definitely no hate towards Dallas and Ryan and Tyler. Obviously, I love what you guys do. I just personally, I think there's definitely some things that might have been done differently writing wise there. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. I'd love to hear them in the comments down below. We'll see you on the next one. Peace.